City. Pittsburgh's longtime head coach Mike Tomlin announced on Tuesday he's stepping down as the Steelers head coach, ending a 19-year run in black and yellow. This comes on the heels of Pittsburgh being eliminated from the postseason following their loss to the Texans Monday night in the wild card round. Before his resignation, Tomlin was the longest tenured head coach of a single North American professional sports franchise, where he never recorded a single losing season as head coach. His departure, though, came as a surprise to many, including a former division foe in Baltimore. Take a listen.
In Pittsburgh?
He did? Is it official?
That's what I keep hearing. So, is he a candidate here?
Holy Mike, wouldn't that be awesome? Only if John takes the Pittsburgh job.
That was Ravens owner Steve Bisciotti, who also just parted ways with his longtime head man. But if you are in the market for a head coaching job, I mean, this is the year for you. 25% of the league currently coachless. Following Tomlin's announcement, 9 franchises now looking for a new head man. This marks the 3rd largest hiring cycle in over a decade. Many of these vacancies won't stay open for long as we bring in CBS Sports NFL writer Tyler Sullivan as we try to pair the perfect marriage for some of these openings around the league. And I want to begin with the aforementioned Steelers. I mean, I think what stands out most is what's that quarterback position going to look like in 2026 if we still don't know the status of Aaron Rodgers. But for what coach would this make the most sense for?
Yeah, that's going to be a big question for a lot of these teams, right? Like, what's your quarterback situation? What's your cap situation? What does it all look like? And that's going to really kind of maybe narrow down the pool for some of these teams. But when I look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, yes, they have those questions, but they are one of the most storied franchises, arguably the most storied franchise that the NFL has to offer, a winning program. And I feel like they like to go with people that they know and that they're familiar with. So I look to a guy like Brian Flores that I think makes a lot of sense for this organization on a number of different fronts. Of course, was with them as an assistant under Mike Tomlin in 2022 after his tenure as head coach with the Miami Dolphins. Since left there, became the DC with the Minnesota Vikings, and has only built his reputation back up as one of the best defensive minds that the NFL has to offer. The Vikings routinely have had one of the best defenses in the league, really a feisty defense in terms of blitzing the quarterback and really putting pressure, and that just feels like Pittsburgh Steelers football, right? That feels like their identity. Of course, they have TJ Watt, and they're going to see what happens to this roster this offseason. I think it could be one of those transformative offseasons where you see Aaron Rodgers obviously potentially move on and maybe other key figures as they spark a rebuild. But when a job like the Pittsburgh Steelers opens up, you're going to get a lot of candidates kind of lining up to go after this job. And I think Flores might be at the top.
Yeah, you talk about it, one of the best defensive minds that are currently in the business, but the Vikings are aggressively trying to retain their guy. We'll see how much luck they have in doing that, but definitely one of the hot names on the market. But as for their division rivals, another one of the longest tenured headmen out in the city of Baltimore, perhaps maybe the most attractive of the jobs available when you're looking at the Ravens. You have Lamar Jackson, you have a winning culture, but who best complements this, I'm going to call it a ready-to-win roster?
Yeah, there's no doubt this is the number one job in the NFL because you have a 2-time MVP in Lamar Jackson. There's no other team that offers that level of elite play, stability at the quarterback spot. So if you're any coach worth your weight in a visor or a headset, you're going to want this job. And I think that Cliff Kingsbury makes a lot of sense for the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, a former head coach, so this would be his second time as a head coach in the NFL. I think that's valuable for a team like this, as you referenced, ready to win now. I don't think that they want to maybe try their hand at a first-time head coach because what if it doesn't work out and maybe he's a little too in front of his skis? There's a lot of questions there. With Cliff Kingsbury, I feel like we kind of know what we're going to get. Obviously, worked with Kyler Murray in Arizona. It worked out for a little bit, but it kind of fell off towards the final stretch there. But then he goes to Washington and works with who has a very similar skill set to Lamar Jackson. And what do they do in year one together? You're talking about a fantastic rookie season that took you to the NFC Championship. Those are the type of results that the Baltimore Ravens want to have. So from a stylistic standpoint, I think this makes sense for Lamar Jackson. And again, it's an experienced head coach. For a team that wants to win right now, I think I would lean towards a coach like Kingsbury, who's going to his second job in the NFL, as opposed to a first-year guy.
Yeah, well, he has that experience with Patrick Mahomes back in Texas Tech. He has that experience, like you mentioned, with Kyler Murray. And I think he's one of those guys that has that experience, maybe elevating some of those mobile quarterbacks. So maybe that's a perfect marriage right there. But I do want to head out west as the Raiders. They've had 6 new head coaches over the last 9 seasons. Now, obviously, they'd like a little bit of stability there, but who gives them that option potentially?
Yeah, certainly want some stability because I think they're paying like every head coach now, it feels like, in a prior contract. Just hasn't worked out for them. So it's been an expensive endeavor, which is kind of why I don't think they're going to get a second tread head coach, you know, one of those guys looking for a second gig, because it's probably going to command a little bit more money. So I think a guy like Clint Kubiak is someone who I find would be really interesting, because as much as we're joking about the Raiders right now, I think that this is a really interesting job for somebody just like him, who has an offensive mind. And this is somewhat close to a blank slate. Obviously, the Pete Carroll, Geno Smith situation, it didn't work out. Geno Smith's not going to be their quarterback in 2026. They have the #1 overall pick that potentially could be Heisman Trophy winner Fernando Mendoza. It's still obviously early in the process, but you're probably going to take a quarterback #1 overall, probably going to be Mendoza. You bring in a young quarterback like that with already some interesting skill position players like Ashton Genty, who spent the first-round pick on, Brock Bowers at the tight end spot. That's a very interesting nucleus that you already have to start building up your offense, along with cap space. And I look at Clint Kubiak, look at him over the last couple of years. He had the New Orleans Saints punching above their weight as the offensive coordinator there in 2024. This season, he has the Seattle Seahawks really firing on all cylinders, continuing the ascension of Sam Darnold at quarterback, has Jackson Smith and Jigba breaking franchise records. So I think that would really be kind of that perfect blend of you bring in a young quarterback, you pair him with a young offensive mind, and that's how you start your rebuild.
Yeah, the top offensive minds that are available, and you got to think about it, he does have that experience under Kyle Shanahan, Mike McDonald, obviously where he is right now, Kevin Stefanski, so maybe it could be a good fit right there in Vegas. But similar to the Raiders, I mean, the Cardinals, they have sat in the cellar of the West for a number of seasons, and they have a solid defense, and whether they decide to move on from Kyler Murray, that's still an unknown. But who could best help turn this franchise around?
I don't think they're going to look far. I think they're going to look in that division, and you're not going to like this.
I'm not going to like this. I know where we're going.
You're not going to like this, because we're going to go to San Francisco. We're going to pluck Robert Saleh out of the Bay Area. We're going to bring him to the desert, because he is someone who I think is going to be really good in his second go-around as head coach. Just didn't work out in New York. When you draft Zach Wilson, the results were not going to be that good. It just wasn't that encouraging in terms of what they were able to do at the quarterback spot. And obviously we know what happens with Aaron Rodgers getting hurt early in that tenure. And again, that position just never really getting figured out. But everywhere else, I did like what they were able to do defensively. He's only followed that up here with the San Francisco 49ers, having them playing very well despite a bunch of different injuries. And so there may be some trepidation by Robert Saleh if he's looking at the Arizona Cardinals and saying, you're going to move on from Kyler Murray. What are we going to do at quarterback? I don't want to go into a situation again that puts me in a weird spot at the most important position in the sport. But you're still talking about a top 5 draft pick at the 2026 NFL draft. You're going to get something for Kyler Murray. You have really interesting weapons in Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison Jr., even Michael Wilson down the stretch this season. So I do think there's an avenue for a quarterback, and the weapons there. I think this is an attractive spot for someone like Saleh.
Yeah, they do have the weapons, but even looking at what Saleh is currently doing right now, he's doing more with less. So imagine what he could do out there in Arizona once they figure out that quarterback position. But hey, how about the Titans? Because I mean, they have the hardest part of that head coach's job squared away. They've got last year's first overall pick in Cam Ward under center. They've got a ton of cap space to assist in their rebuild. So who's the best fit to go along for the ride in Tennessee?
I think Kevin Stefanski would be really fun in Tennessee. And you reference it. This is something where I think he would find really attractive. And this is kind of one of the more underrated openings in the NFL. Obviously, we have some big organizations like the Pittsburgh Steelers that we were talking about, Lamar Jackson in Baltimore you compare yourself with. But Tennessee has a lot to offer because they're a blank slate. And as you noted, they do have the quarterback situation figured out. I do think that Cam Ward is a guy you can build around. One of the more underrated stories of this regular season was Cam Ward kind of figured it out. He was playing really well down the stretch despite not having a real superb roster around him. What will change that? Top 5 pick at the 2026 NFL draft that you don't have to use at quarterback, over $100 million in salary cap space. You bring in someone like Kevin Stefanski, who he doesn't have to worry about a quarterback situation like he did in Cleveland during his tenure there. You have stability there. You have an offensive-minded head coach. I think that checks a lot of boxes, especially in an AFC South that just feels like there's always turnover, teams rising and falling all the time. Who says it couldn't be Tennessee in short order?
That makes a lot of sense. Maybe one of the underrated vacancies that are currently open, considering the pieces that they do have in play and where they're picking. So maybe that's something that you could see them, a nice little marriage there. But hey, let's talk about Stefanski's former team, because Cleveland, I mean, in a nice way to put it, Cleveland's been a bit of a circus, but they have their ringleader in Shedeur Sanders. This team hasn't owned a division title since, I mean, the Reagan administration. So who do you see maybe orchestrating this big ring?
Yeah, the Cleveland Browns, they're going through it, right? They seem to perennially be going through it. But I do think that this is one of those rare instances where they might actually look internally, and that's just bringing defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz as their head coach. And again, this is a rare thing because typically when you fire your head coach, you're cleaning house throughout the entire staff, right? But I don't know. I think that he has a legitimate shot at getting this job. And you look at what was their strength and what has been their strength over the last handful of years. It's been that defensive side of the ball. He has a tight relationship with those defensive players, key among them Myles Garrett. There's belief in him in that locker room. So who's to say that he couldn't just take on the head coaching role for the Cleveland Browns and really lead this organization, starting with that defense first? Now, ownership probably is going to want to know who your offensive coordinator is going to be in that scenario. What is it going to look like on that side of the ball? And what kind of offensive minds are you trying to bring in to help a Shedeur Sanders going into year 2, or whatever you want to do on the offensive side of the ball? That's going to be a key question, but don't sleep on an internal hire there for Cleveland.
Keep it in the house, keep it in the family. And like you mentioned, this defense has been playing out of their minds. So why not keep things rolling? All right, well, how about the Giants? Because, I mean, Jackson Dart appears as their guy for the future. They've got a host of young skill players, perhaps maybe one of the more promising vacancies. So who would best fit in the Big Apple?
You know, there's a really top candidate that we haven't brought up yet, and that's John Harbaugh.
I knew it was coming at some point.
Maybe the number one candidate, right? Like, he has to go somewhere. He's not getting a job, and it's going to be the New York Giants in this scenario. And as you referenced, this is arguably the best job. I think for Harbaugh, this is the best job this offseason, this hiring cycle. Obviously, he's not going to go back to the Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. So to me, this is his preferred, this is his ideal landing spot, because you look at this Giants team, there's a lot to like, and there's a lot already in place to maybe spearhead this rebuild into maybe just 1 year, 2 years, as opposed to a 5-year rebuild that we see with some of these teams. You have Jackson Dart as your starting quarterback. And yes, there are some issues with Jackson Dart in terms of his willingness to just get clobbered on scrambles. It seems like every single time he decides to tuck and run it, he's not sliding. But what did John Harbaugh do in year 2 of Lamar Jackson coming off of his rookie season? Completely changed the offense. Starting quarterback. I think you could do something very similar to cater to Jackson Dart to help him in his development as a dual threat quarterback. And then you look at the defensive side of the ball. Dexter Lawrence, Abdul Carter, Brian Burns. There's a lot to like on that side of the ball as well. So you have your quarterback, you have studs on defense, and you still have wiggle room in terms of salary cap space, ton of draft picks. This, to me, is a great spot for Harbaugh in his second act as a head coach.
Yeah, between Baltimore and the Giants, two of probably the best options that are out there. Like you mentioned, not going back to Baltimore, but when you're on that outside of that rebuild, maybe the best landing spot for Harbaugh to turn things around over there. But how about we go now to South Florida? Because Mike McDaniel, well, he's out, but perhaps more questions, I would say, than answers for the Dolphins right now. But who fits the bill?
I think that they want John Harbaugh, right? It does feel like that's who they want, but I just put him to the New York Giants, so he can't go there. So this is where you kind of have to play the game, right? What are the links? What are the affiliations that you can maybe say, okay, here's a tie from the organization to this head coaching candidate. And I point to somebody like Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Chargers. And the connection here is obviously he is under Jim Harbaugh, the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers. Where was he prior to the Chargers? He was the head coach at the University of Michigan, and Minter was his DC. What does the University of Michigan have to do with any of this? Well, owner Stephen Ross of the Miami Dolphins, alma mater is the University of Michigan, one of the biggest donors, very involved with the football program. I wonder if we see some Wolverine pipelines kind of connecting these dots here to bring Minter to South Florida. And one of the kind of bright spots for the Dolphins down the stretch has been their defense and how well they played to kind of go above 500 in the second half of the year. Almost saved Mike McDaniel's job. That to me was because of that defensive side of the ball. I think you bring in Minter, a first-time head coach, ties to the organization through Michigan. That to me makes sense as a pairing.
Miami on the defensive way as a head man, but I do want to wrap this up talking about the Falcons, whose decisions will ultimately run through our former colleague here with CBS Sports and former Atlanta Signal caller Matt Ryan as their president of football. But what direction can you see them heading in the ATL?
So very similar. Follow the connections. Follow where everybody was working together at one point a billion years ago, right? Matt Ryan, well, it's not going to be any CBS employees, but I think it's going to be someone that he worked with the Atlanta Falcons when he was the quarterback and not the president of football. I think it's Mike McDaniel. I think this one is really interesting. And obviously Mike McDaniel worked under Kyle Shanahan as the offensive coordinator under Dan Quinn. He was an offensive assistant during kind of the peak years of Matt Ryan when he was in 2015, 2016, MVP quarterback, going to a Super Bowl. So there's a familiarity there with Mike McDaniel, but more importantly to me, Mike McDaniel is one of the best offensive minds in the NFL. And when I look at the current openings in the NFL, the Atlanta Falcons have a lot of interesting weapons that I would love to see what Mike McDaniel could do. I mean, we've seen Devon Achane with Mike McDaniel. What is Bijan Robinson going to look like in that offense? Drake London in that offense? And more importantly, how are they going to get Michael Penix Jr. is coming off of the injury? How do they maximize him as their franchise quarterback? We did see Mike McDaniel get the best out of Tua Tagovailoa early in his tenure as head coach of the Dolphins. Obviously, it petered out down the stretch, was benched at the end of this season, but he did get the best out of Tua. I think he could do the same exact thing with Michael Penix Jr.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense now that you bring that up, kind of that relationship, because, I mean, we do bring that system back to Atlanta where he did serve as that offensive assistant with the Falcons in the 2015 and 2016 season when they did make it to the Super Bowl, maybe spinning the block again and bringing that back. Maybe that'll bode well for Penix and co, but we'll see. Yet to be determined. Tyler, as always, we'll be awaiting to see how these chips will fall, but it's going to be fun in the meantime. Appreciate you stopping by. Well, taking a look at the AFC Divisional Round preview. Saturday, 4:30, Bills, Broncos, if you recall. I mean, Buffalo did beat Denver in the 2024 wild card round. Denver is 5-1 in their last 6 home postseason games. They're defending the Mile High City. Not an easy place to play. Broncos, meanwhile, tied for the most wins in a season in team history with their 14-win season. They'll look to add on another win in the postseason Saturday at 4:30 Eastern.